You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you today. Today we are going to have someone very interesting, but before I introduce him, I want to say thank you so much to people listening from the United States, from Canada, from Australia. We have listeners in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America. And well, I have been doing the show for over almost 10 years now. It's unbelievable how time flies. Okay, so today we have someone from Canada. His company is Abledocs. His name is Adam Spencer. And I have to say for our listeners, I was very happy to be able to attend this virtual event, Access Israel, this week. And I have to say, one of my dear friends, Deborah Roth, was able to be a speaker there, and Adam was a speaker there as well. What a wonderful job people are doing with accessibility worldwide. And I was talking before to Adam, and he was expressing how important it is to make it a global issue for everybody. You know, it's not about the United States, Canada, Colombia, it's everywhere, and we are uniting forces to make this a better world for everybody. So Adam, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Alvaro. Great to be here, and thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. And the first question would be the obvious one. What is Abledocs and when it began?
Sure. So Abledocs was founded in January of 2019 as a conglomerate of the world's leading PDF accessibility experts coming under one roof. So most of us have been in the space, or the founders have been in the space for over 10 years each. And we really wanted to take a different approach to document accessibility, not the traditional, manually tag a document. We wanted to see what else could be done. So in less than 2 years, we've expanded into 5 countries around the world. Our clients are global, but we are really the largest PDF accessibility product and service provider in the world. And we're the only company to guarantee the compliance of every file we produce and back it with a $10 million liability guarantee. So we've put our money where our mouth is and really believe in the usability for end users and helping our clients protect their interests, making sure that all of their content is accessible to their clients.
I know for you, Adam, and for me, it's obvious, but for some people it's not. Why is accessibility, and in particular digital accessibility, important today?
Well, I think one thing to remember is the speed of access to information. And historically, accessibility has been reactive. Someone has an issue accessing something, they then put in a request saying, I need my information to be accessible. And the reality is we're changing so quickly in a digital world that we don't have time to wait for something like that, a reaction to an accessibility request. So when we're looking at how quickly and how effectively information needs to be processed, COVID aside, COVID has supercharged that need. But everything has moved digitally so quickly that to not have accessible content would be putting access to information behind the 8 ball for millions upon millions of people around the world. And that's why we've seen legislation come out that's proactive, ensuring that content's accessible before it's published rather than reactive.
I think that's a great point, Adam. And something that comes to mind, and for our listeners, I have been able to promote the ADA when I was working in New York, and even from here, I have been able to do that this year for the 30th anniversary of the passing of the ADA in the United States. And everybody says, okay, according to the ADA, websites, documents have to be accessible. The question remaining, Adam, is how are companies meeting that criteria, and how long before we can say most of maybe the 500 most important companies in the world are meeting that criteria?
When I got into document accessibility many moons ago, I thought we were going to be out of business in 5 years. It was kind of a short term, let's help bridge the gap, and then technology will solve everything and we're out. That was 12 years ago. So as we know, we're not quite there yet. I think the reality is the awareness level of big business and the assistance of the strength of legislation and the efforts that have been done by the advocacy, end users who are beyond frustrated of being ignored, have really done an amazing job of getting this in front of corporate and government legislators, saying, this is my fundamental right to access information. How dare you keep it away from me? In terms of the shift that we've even seen in the last 2 years, we're seeing organizations take a much more holistic approach. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, got a sneeze there. They're taking a much more holistic approach to their accessibility implementation. Everyone thinks websites. Our website has to be accessible. Our app needs to be accessible.
Right.
And PDF has often been, or document accessibility has often been left to the last minute. Whereas ironically, document accessibility is one of the easiest things to fix. It's that people aren't willing to ask the question of, how do I do this in a cost-effective and sustainable way? They think all of their authors should be accessibility experts. And what we've seen is that type of approach works for some parts of organizations, but not for all. And I think that's a big difference in document accessibility versus web.
Well, that's an interesting point. And going to PDF accessibility, I am present in so many groups on Facebook, WhatsApp, you name it, with people who are frustrated with PDFs, whether they live in the US, in the UK, or in Latin America. My question is it very difficult to create PDF documents that are fully accessible with JAWS, NVDA, or even, TalkBack or VoiceOver?
The simple answer is no, it's not complicated if you're using the right tools and the right approach. And I think there's been a myopic view of how documents should be made accessible. A lot of people expect very large software implementation companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Adobe to solve the problem. And they forget that that's not the business that these companies are in. And there are tools, and I'm not trying to be salesy at all, but there are tools that generate fully compliant files in one click. You just have to ask for the right software, ask the right people. And we see so many, even remediation companies pop up, and they're remediating using slower, out-of-date tools that end up costing organizations so much more. And it goes back to that training question as well. How much time, effort, and money is an organization prepared to spend on teaching someone PDF accessibility when they're not going to be an expert at it? Right. And it's so specialized, and that's not a bad thing, because when you see that specialization, you really see the cost benefit of document accessibility. I mean, we've done studies that show PDF accessibility is 1/4 of the cost of making a website accessible for the same volume of content. And that's a huge amount of money when you're looking at overall organizational savings. So it's do I have the right tool? Am I asking the right questions about my document accessibility strategy? Is this something that I can do, or should I get some help with it? Do I have the right tool for the job? And not being fooled by some of the really corner-cutting applications that try to gloss over it. In a simple manner, you can just make everything accessible and don't worry about it. But the software doesn't actually do that. And there's a big difference between readable, something that can be heard, versus something that's accessible and usable. And we've seen, so many of these shortcuts being taken that really don't deliver accessible content because people are looking for an easy button. And the reality is you need to know what you're getting in order to make that easy button effective.
Yes, you're right, Adam. And I wonder if someone who is blind or visually impaired or has any other problem accessing a PDF document while they are working at the office, anywhere in the world, what would be your recommendation for that person being frustrated right now and thinking, oh my God, my coworker is not working here. I am alone at the office. I need to finish this today. But this PDF document is not accessible for me. Is there any way to get assistance? And would that, if that doesn't exist, could it be a good idea to have a possibility of calling someone? Or, I mean, maybe you're going to tell me, well, you could try Be My Eyes or IRA service. They could maybe help you a little bit. Yeah, but they're not going to read the whole thing to you.
No, and I mean, again, not to be too promotional, but our team believes that we're here to help. Right. And for no other reason than access to information is critical. Right. So, as I say to all of our clients, give us a call, send us an email. If you're having a problem, especially as an end user, if you have a problem, we even remediate those files free of charge some of the time, based on the type of content, obviously. But when someone's having that challenge, access to information is everything. And we see that with students all the time. Colleges and universities, they're trying to put their best foot forward, but they don't know the questions to ask. And we stress over and over again, just call. We're not charging you for that call. It's not, that's not the type of organization we are. We want to make sure people are at least making the right decision, an informed decision, and getting the content that they need in an accessible way, so we can build a strategy going forward so they never have to deal with that problem again. The other piece is recognizing in advance that the types of content that are being created are different, the applications that are being used, the processes that are being used, and why there's this reluctance to admit that we don't know the answer. So ask for help. We're creating a new not-for-profit foundation called the PDFUA Foundation, and it is specifically for end users to ask those questions and say, I'm having a problem. What should I do with this file? And whether that's an end user trying to read it, or an author trying to create it, or a testing group trying to validate it, it's really designed as a hub for PDF accessibility, specifically about PDFUA, the Universal Accessibility Standard for PDF, to ask those questions in a safe way. So, it's okay to admit that you don't have the answer. There's nothing wrong with that. And we just wanted to make sure that there was a place for those answers. But, it's about time that we stood up and said, we're here to help as much as we can.
That's wonderful news. I didn't know, and I'm sure most of our listeners didn't know, the kind of work you do. Although I will ask you again this later on, but how could people reach out to you guys about that kind of assistance?
Well, you can always, I will happily provide my personal email if you'd like, but you can always reach out to us through the website at abledocs.com. We have a form there. You can also email us at contact@abledocs.com. You can find us on Twitter at able_docs. You can find us on LinkedIn under Abledocs. We live online, and we're always here to help. And now with the PDFUA Foundation, you can go to pdfua.foundation, and that will be a hub. The site goes up next week, and that will be a full hub with live chat, an accessible live chat mechanism where those questions can be asked and answered as quickly as possible.
Just a reminder to our listeners, as we are recording this interview, the website is going to be on for sure.
Oh, right. Good point.
Probably 1, 2, or 3 weeks later on. So yeah. So Adam, for those who don't know, and I'm sure some people don't. What is a PDF?
It is, I mean, in simplest terms, it is one of the oldest file formats designed to share information in a perfect representation across any platform. And historically, PDF was seen as an inaccessible option, but we've been able to make it accessible for well over 15 years. And as we have now been able to unleash and unlock all of that amazing richness, a PDF can be just as accessible as a web page, so long as, again, the work is put into the file itself. But we now even have a fully accessible experience on mobile. We're seeing more initiatives go down that direction, which was always one of the previous complaints. I mean, Adobe just came out with their new Liquid mode a few weeks ago, which is reflowing all of that content so that it's much easier to consume. And there's an incredibly dedicated group of experts from around the world pushing to make PDF as accessible as possible every single day, and it's really exciting to see that happen for a format that is used for everything, whether it's a letter, a memo, a bank statement, a utility bill. PDF is the most ubiquitous file format in the world, and an amazing tool to distribute that content.
Adam, why to use a PDF instead of a Word document? I want to understand the difference, because sometimes people have asked me that when they are angry with a PDF. They say to me, why is this not in a Word document format, please?
Well, the big answer is distribution and fidelity of content. So why do we use a PDF? A PDF can be a document of record, right? We can guarantee that what was seen on one computer is exactly the same when I send it to you and you open it on yours. So with a Word file, yes, we can protect the content, but it doesn't have the same archiving capabilities. It doesn't have the same richness of format. So for things that are highly designed coming out of an application like InDesign or Publisher or Photoshop, Word can't do that. So to think that everything is going to be in a Word document is a very narrow approach to how content is going to be accessed. And Word has many, many, many more limitations for accessibility than PDF. The problem is people don't take the time to learn what can be done in PDF. We've been told, simplify your authoring techniques to make a file more accessible. Well, you can't simplify complex content necessarily. How do you simplify a financial table? You can't. But PDF has the mechanism built into it to allow that table to be completely accessible with multiple levels of headings in the columns and rows. We can have subheadings. We can span multiple pages. And a lot of what has been used as an approach is really a workaround. So yes, JAWS can play really nicely with headings and paragraphs and lists in Word, but it can do the exact same thing in PDF. The challenge is people aren't taking the time to learn how to get it into PDF. And that's okay. Like, that's not something that someone should be ashamed of. It's that it's its own skill set. And to learn that skill set takes some time. We see this with Word all the time. Bad document authoring because people don't know how to generate the content. And that's okay. But that's why we teach. That's why we have to share this information so people understand what those capabilities are. And that's why PDF accessibility is still so championed by so many people around the world because of how capable it is. People just don't want to learn. And they want an easy fix rather than learning how.
Okay, now I have a follow-up that, to me at least, is very interesting to be able to ask you this, Adam, and is so many people in the blind community say, this PDF document, I have to convert to Word. Mm-hmm. So my question to you, Adam, it would be two questions in one, really, because one would be, do you think blind and visually impaired people should get used to using PDF and understanding, because I have never found a tutorial on how to use PDFs being blind. I have always heard, yeah, you can use some of that with JAWS maybe, but the other part is try to convert it to other format. So that's one question. Do you think we should get used to and analyze what are the strategies to make them accessible? And the second question is, if we have to convert the PDF into Word, that doesn't destroy a little bit the substance of the original document. And my question is regarding work. When you are working and in a company, they say, okay, this is a PDF, you need to fill out what is inside. And you say, it's not accessible, I'm going to convert it to Word and I'm going to fill it in, and then I'm going to send them that as a Word document or maybe as a PDF, but not taking into account the original document. What do you think about the whole thing?
You know, that's such a common challenge. And the answer is an organization that is telling you to convert your PDF into a Word file is not caring about your user experience. Because, for example, a heavily laid out file in PDF does not convert well into Word. It just doesn't. You're going to have text boxes come in because you've got call out sections, and it really makes it difficult for that content to be conveyed. Bringing in, again, complex tables, that you're going to lose that fidelity. The alt text isn't brought in. All your organization needs to do is make sure they have a way of making that PDF accessible. By not having a strategy in place to make that document accessible, they are causing more harm than good. And unfortunately, it's such a short-term solution rather than addressing the core problem. The PDF can be accessible. There is nothing in PDF that cannot be made accessible. And in the right hands can be made accessibly very easily. So for an organization that's trying to ignore the problem or make the problem go away, they're only delaying the inevitable, which is make the PDF accessible from the start, and then you don't need to worry about it. If you're trying to going back to your question about an end user, demand the PDF be made accessible. If you're accepting the Word file, you're not getting the experience you deserve. You deserve full semantic markup. You deserve all of that structure, not just being read a straight line of text. Because those semantics, those headings, they're not coming into the Word file either. Navigation is critical. The longer a file becomes, that ability to navigate content becomes more and more and more important. And so when you strip all of that, all of the author's intent disappears. So yes, you can read the content, but are you able to comprehend the content in a way that makes sense? And the answer is no. You know, that's simple. Like we've over the years, we've had requests for, just give me a plain text file. A plain text file has no markup.
Right.
How do you know what section you're in? How do you navigate to another page properly?
That's true.
And all of that rich information is gone. All because the organization doesn't have a plan in place on how to make content accessible. And that PDF, you know, I am not just, contrary to potential popular belief, I'm not just pro PDF. There is content that should be in a web page. There's content that should be a tweet. There's content that should be a PDF. And finding the right format for that type of content is the most important part of accessibility, because context is everything. And as soon as you strip that context away, it's just a stream of text, and it means nothing. So that meaning behind it is what's critical, and an organization needs to have a plan for making that document accessible.
Now, a question comes to mind, Adam, and is regarding who is teaching corporations about document accessibility, and in which ways are these happening? Like, people are going to corporations. Let's say, let me give an example, like IBM. Going to IBM and saying, I'm going to give you a conference about document accessibility in your organization. Is that happening, Adam?
It definitely happens. I mean, we get asked to train and speak to countless organizations every year. I think there's still this reluctance, particularly with document accessibility, to ask for help. And I really don't understand why. There's no reason why you can't ask for help. And it's not a sign of weakness. In my opinion, it's a sign of strength. And the problem is, accessibility, for those of you listening to this who are old enough to remember Y2K, accessibility has become the latest Y2K. Everyone's popping up as a consultant. I'm an expert.
That's true.
It is. And everyone's looking at this like a gold rush.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate because there's a huge community of people who are passionate, capable, skilled, and care about making content truly accessible, whether it's document, website, or application. But you've got to vet the person who is giving that training, not just, well, they're the cheapest, or they're, they called me first. Do you know that they're the best at training this? Or are they just trying to sell you a product? Are they just trying to, ultimately get more for themselves rather than empower the organization? And that's a really, really important part of how do you contact a large organization and show that you know what you know? Are they even using the right testing tools? Do they know the difference between them? That's a big question to ask.
Now, reading part of your website and talking to you about lawsuits that can come to companies that don't comply to these things, I wonder, well, to me it's sad as an end user to say, oh my God, you have to sue some of the organizations because they are not doing what they should do. From the get-go, they don't understand the importance. It's like when the NFB has to sue Uber or has to sue any company because they are not doing what they should do according to the ADA, but also according to common sense, and it seems natural. But that has to be something that wakes them up, right? When you go there and say, look, this is not only the right thing to do, but this is gonna stop you from getting sued, and you don't want that.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I live in Canada. Mm-hmm. We are not as litigious as our friends to the south.
True.
But it's out of frustration, right? Yes. People sue as a last resort. It's, you're not listening to me.
Yes.
I need help. I need your help to be committed to making my interaction with your organization easier. Yes. I'm wanting to give you my money. You know what? Yes. Money talks, right? Yes, as the old saying goes.
Yes.
But if you're not prepared to listen, then I need to draw your attention to this. Yes. And I know for a fact, organizations and individuals reach out countless times saying, please make this accessible. I mean, we saw this in Canada with the Donna Jodin case against the federal government, and she was ignored for months, and she couldn't apply for a job. The level of frustration just boils over and says, you know what? You're impeding my ability to live my best life. Mm-hmm. I need your help. And if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to sue you. Mm-hmm. And if organizations, and bluntly, if countries don't have strong, proactive legislation saying, like we have here in Ontario, I mean, in many respects, we have the strongest accessibility laws in the world, where content has to be made accessible. We have a compliance deadline coming up at the end of this year. It's been on the books for 7 years. We're kind of waiting and saying, okay, it's finally here. And I was on a call this morning before you and I were speaking, and the question was, do you know about this law? Yeah, I'm well aware of this law. We've been working on this for a long time. And the reality is, it doesn't show up on people's radars until there's a stick. And that stick is either legislation, financial penalty, or a lawsuit. And that's just how corporations work. And we in our accessibility bubble, and I say this with all the love and respect, we get it. right? You're already preaching to the converted. We know that accessibility is important,
Right.
but the general public doesn't see it. They don't experience it. They don't know that what they don't know. And so it's continuously ignored, and until we aggressively get out there and say, hey, you need to make this accessible or else. We aren't seeing that movement. And we see the disparity across jurisdictions. You know, the ADA is an amazing piece of legislation, revolutionary 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the enforcement of it and the teeth of it is often handled by the states and or used as the power behind a lawsuit. And that's the way that their system works. You know, it's different here in Canada and in the EU with the EU regulation that came into effect in September, but it's a different approach. We've got to make it work, and people are finally waking up and realizing we need to do something.
You're absolutely right. And my last question, and one of the best things of doing this podcast, and for our listeners, I told in one of my earliest interviews that I used to work in radio some time ago, but it's just not to have some questions ready, but to listen to the person you're interviewing, and so many things pop up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a last question that comes up from what you're saying, and is, I'm curious. You say that your legislation by the end of this year in Canada, everything has to be...
in Ontario, not the whole country, just our province.
In Ontario. Okay, in Ontario. What does that mean, practically speaking, next year? What happens if an employee who has a disability is not able to find accessible documents in the organization he's working for? What can he do about it?
Yeah, there's a tribunal mechanism where a complaint can be filed with either the Accessibility Directorate of Ontario or the Ontario Human Rights Commission, indicating non-compliance to the law. And you know, organizations employing more than 50 people must comply with this or face financial penalty. And the penalties can be steep. Again, up until this point, there have been a number of what I will call encouraging letters sent to large organizations saying, your content's not accessible, you've got to make sure that it is. Because then we roll into phase 2 of it, which is internal documentation. You know, we're worried about external facing, client facing content, but now we're going to be shifting into internal facing content. And so no content can be produced or published without it being accessible from the beginning. And if you don't, there are mechanisms up to $100,000 per document per day levied on the organization. And you know, the answer is not to remove all content for everyone. And because now no one has access to it, which is counterproductive. Learning about it and bluntly planning for it is the critical part of that success. And it will be interesting. I mean, we were asked, what about COVID and how does that affect timelines of things? And those of us who've been around for so long, we're all laughing saying, this isn't new. This didn't just start in March. We've had this legislation for 7 years. Let's get on it. So it will be interesting to see. And I suspect there's going to be a landmark case to really bring the attention of accessibility and the AODA to the general population, saying, if you don't do this, this is the potential outcome you can face.
Now, Adam, in a clarification, because I get so excited. I worked for a big radio station here in Colombia last year. So yeah, just for people wondering. Okay, I have to ask the last following because you make me think. You say companies with more than 50 employees, and what happens with less than 50?
Their deadline is the year following. So they've given smaller organizations more time to reach that goal. Again, trying to be considerate about financial constraints and making sure that it's sustainable. But that's the plan. The idea is by 2025 that everyone is fully accessible.
Adam, you participated at the Access Israel. What did you think about that event and what Access Israel is doing?
It's been so exciting to be involved, and we're a premier sponsor of the event and the organization, trying to really spread the experiences of accessibility from around the world. And I think Access Israel does such an amazing job of networking through the world, championing accessibility, hearing stories about different experiences in different countries and different organizations, whether that's private organizations or governmental bodies. It's so exciting to see such an incredible group of friends and peers and colleagues and new friends coming in saying, we want to learn more, and how do we get accessibility into the four corners of the earth? And it's just, I leave those amazing webinars fired up and saying, okay, you know what, someone from Tanzania was looking about how to make their website accessible. How awesome is that? After being in the industry for so long, it's so refreshing to hear that people are still just starting their accessibility journeys and can leverage all of the experience that an event like Access Israel brings under one roof. It's just tremendous.
And Adam, two things. One, I'm going to have people from Access Israel on the show for sure. You can count on it. And I am just curious. I'm sorry I have so many questions, but it's a very important issue, really is.
Sure.
I wonder, Adam, why did you begin in accessibility? Why this field for you?
Well, the truth of it is my mom told me to. My mother was working at a bank, and she had staff who had various disabilities, including print disabilities, and she was having a hard time finding a reliable vendor to help the organization make their content accessible all the way back in 2009. And ironically, we couldn't do any work for that bank for 3 years because of non-compete, or conflict of interest rather. But it was recognizing that there's a huge gap in how we make content accessible, and I had a technology background and was able to really launch in and take a different approach to document accessibility, and even after doing it with my last company for 9 years, there's more that we can do, and how do we keep pushing the limits of usability and accessibility and sustainability of accessibility, and that's a really big theme that I've been reiterating for a long time. It's the sustainability of accessibility. So I've been committed to PDF and document accessibility since then, and ironically now my mom works for me, so it's come full circle.
Full circle, yes. Well, Adam, I have to say it's very nice, and I have to thank you because you were very quick in responding to my request for this interview. I know how busy you are. You guys are doing a lot of good things, and so I'm very thankful.
It's my pleasure, and I'm so glad that we could have this time. And any of your listeners who ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Always happy to have a conversation.
Please remind us how to reach out.
Either reach us through our website at abledocs.com, abledocs.com, or send me a personal email, aspencer@abledocs.com, aspencer@abledocs.com.
All right, Adam. Thank you again, and I'm going to be really sharing this interview with a lot of people and companies too. You can count on that.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Alvaro. Pleasure to speak with you as always.
My pleasure. And for our listeners, remember always to smile. And if you want to be on the show, you can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at lowvisionbureau. You can find me on YouTube. And definitely, it's very important to have this conversation every time we can. So accessibility is one of the priorities coming up for everybody. Okay, so this is Alvaro from LVB Show saying good night.